Good morning. I am Kevin Price. Delighted to be with you. Going to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. Got a lot to talk about on today's program. Dr. Geetinder Goyal, he is a regular contributor on The Price of Business, and he's been working extremely diligently on creating a better way and helping people, and he's part of a larger movement of creating a better way to help people get their health care. And he's got a practice here in the development called Our Way Health, and that's ourwayhealth.com. Meanwhile, Dr. Michael Accad, he is a leader. He's really I guess you could say a paradigm shifter, if you will, in this whole movement that I'm alluding to. And what it is getting insurance and government out of healthcare, because those things only add layers to the cost of healthcare and really making an exchange between a doctor and a patient. What a novel idea, one that works so well for centuries. And so we're going to have a lively, robust conversation on this important topic. Dr. Goyal, as always, welcome to the program. A little more on your practice and talk about Dr. Accad.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me. It is a wonderful morning here in Houston. Dr. Accad, welcome to our program. I'm really excited that you found time to join us. Thank you very much for having me. A believer in the free market like you are. I've been following you and reading your blog at alertandoriented.com. Which is excellent blog, and I think any physician, especially young physician training, needs to read and get familiar with so they can understand the landscape of healthcare in our country. And like Dr. Accad, I decided to not join mainstream medicine, but go the free market route and offer my services at cash directly to my patients who I care for. And we're starting with primary care.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Dr. Accad, I found out about you through the Mises Institute. I love the Mises Institute, huge fan, and stumbled on your content. And the free market works in every area, especially healthcare. And my view is that the reason why we're in the mess today is because of a lot of decisions that were made, particularly in the 1960s, on changing the role of government when it came to healthcare. Some would even argue a couple of decades before that, and trying to get the insurance industry, and really creating a disconnect between the consumer and the service, which is healthcare, and creating all kinds of distortions. Talk a little bit about that.
I agree with you. In fact, I actually would date back even before then. I think doctors in some way are responsible for part of the problem when we ask governments to give us licenses to practice medicine, and therefore exclude other people, and creating a cartel, if you will, for medicine, because that, in a way, told patients, you are incapable of determining what's good for you. Let us decide for you what is good medicine. And that set into motion a series of problems and further government interventions and so forth, which over the decades have led us to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely true. Go ahead, Dr. Goyal, your question?
Dr. Accad, you are a cardiologist. Obviously, you have to do internal medicine and then cardiology training. You have a practice, but you are also a very avid blogger. My first question to you is, how do you find time? How do you find time to do both the things? It is, running a practice needs a lot of skills, not just, in the office, but also business skills. And I am trying to do that. I know how hard it is. But then writing, and you've become such a prolific writer, how do you find time and how do you find the balance to do all this?
Well, I'm not sure I found the balance, to tell you the truth. Yeah. But you're right. It takes a lot of time. That said, the reason I chose to quit the rat race that was, the traditional way of practicing medicine, and step out of the system, is precisely to have more time with my patients. Because once you do that, there's a lot of fewer distractions coming in your way when you run your practice. So there are some business skills that one needs to have, but by and large, it's pretty simple. It's not that complicated. You end up having more time, with your patients, and then more time for yourself as well. to reflect on things, to experience, how medicine is meant to be to begin with. And then for me, I've always enjoyed writing. I started writing, it's been a few years, so it's not a new skill, and I practiced that for a while, and then I thought, well, it'd be a good way for me to share my thoughts with other physicians through my blog, and so that's what I've been doing.
Let me ask you, Dr. Accad, because sometimes, there's sometimes people are very free market in certain areas, but not in general. Are you a free market guy in general? Are you a Mises guy in general? I'm just curious.
Very, very radical.
Okay. Yeah, so am I, by the way. The longer I go, the more I believe Mises may be right that there is no third way. There is no way, between socialism and free markets that work. And so I was just curious. This is an aside. Dr. Goyal.
My next question is, Dr. Accad, that part of what I do here is, like yourself, is get the message out. And, the movement of moving towards the free market and stepping out of the box needs to be spread, especially amongst the physicians. But as a community, we are usually, I feel like, a little afraid to step out, especially once you are finishing training and you're ready to join the main market, I guess. It is hard for physicians to say, look, I'm going to try something different. So how do we get the message across? How do we, if there is a room full of 100 physicians, what would you tell them they should be doing?
Well, that's a very good question. I think an important one as well. And you're right, physicians typically may be more risk averse, especially medicine seems so complicated when you work within the system that it's hard to imagine how it is outside of the system, and it's therefore hard to consider taking that step. On the other hand, I would appeal precisely to that risk, that sense of risk, because in my mind, in the long term, it's riskier to stay in the system than to step outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
The system is getting more and more congested. It's teetering on the brink. It may go bankrupt. And therefore, that's really, the reason why I decided to make my move is because I thought, this is not, there's no hopeful sign if you stay within the system. Your income is going to drop, your quality of life is going to drop, your professional satisfaction, your integrity, your ability to do what you think is right is going to be compromised if you stay within the system. And therefore, it's risky to keep doing, to stay on that track, and it's a better move to take an upfront risk. I agree. There's a risk in terms of income. When you step outside the system, you don't take insurance. You're gonna suffer from that. But by and large, more and more patients are recognizing the value of having a doctor who is beholden to their interests and not to the interests of the system. And therefore, I think it's just a little phase that's difficult, and once you overcome that phase, then you're in much better shape.
I'm interested. I sit there and I wonder because, again, the reason why health costs, tactical health costs are so expensive is because of layers. As Thomas Sowell may have put it best on why Obamacare couldn't work. In my opinion, why Obamacare couldn't work. How can adding another layer of costs, a.k.a. government, somehow make it cheaper? It doesn't. And we've seen what the result has been, and he said that before Obamacare became law. It would seem to me that getting more time with my patient and getting bureaucracy, either government or insurance or both, out of my financial formula, I'm going to have a revenue neutral, maybe even a revenue positive scenario by that change. What is the cause of the resistance? Are they all just creature of habits? Or, talk a little bit about that, Dr. Accad.
There is. It's there's a bit of a herd mentality, among doctors. So it's hard for a doctor to sort of try, to step outside of the flock, if you will. There is an entrepreneurial risk of now, depending on your own skills, really to appeal to the patients directly and have patients, make that payment directly to you, as opposed to relying on insurance contracts and Medicare contracts, which are, an easier source of revenue, if you will, through the system. But you're right that otherwise the costs of running a business in the system are getting enormous. You are forced to join a large group because the overhead is so large that doctors cannot remain independent. They have to join other groups and at times even become employees. And so you're correct. I mean, I think once somebody views it that way, I think it makes perfect sense to try to make a move. It's a little bit harder for specialists than it is for primary care physicians, because specialists depend on a network of other primary care physicians to sort of refer patients to them, and therefore if they go and strike out on their own, it's a little harder. But I think it can be done. I mean, obviously I'm a cardiologist. I do practice general medicine as well as cardiology, but it's a little harder for specialists, and there needs to be enough momentum and a critical mass, if you will, of doctors stepping out of the system for this to be really easier for specialists.
Dr. Accad's website, draccad.com. Dr. Goyal can be found at ourwayhealth.com. Dr. Goyal, literally 30 seconds left. Wrap it up for us, please.
I'm so excited that there is a movement of physicians that are now deciding to take matters in their own hands. And it is really time that we step out and say, look, we have to be at the table and make decisions that determine where the healthcare of this country is going to be in the next, 5, 10, 15 years. It's not the government. It's not the insurance companies. It has to be people who provide care, the physicians, and people who receive care, our consumers, our patients. And we have to get together, and transaction has to happen between those two for us to bring transparency back into the system. And that is what is going to reduce the healthcare costs in this country.
Yep.
Amen to that.
Great way to end a segment. Thank you, gentlemen. When we come back, much more for you. We want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at usatoreview.com, and this is The Price of Business.